a fire truck in sight. How did that happen?
We pre-deployed the most amount of emergency resources that we could with what we had. With the pre-deployment, when the fire takes off, we're going to push as many resources that we can at that particular incident. And that's what we did. We did exactly what we could with what we had.
So you're saying you didn't have enough resources?
I would say in a win event like this that we are living today in day 3, something that is as...
You said that the fire department cuts were minimal. It's minimal in comparison to the ginormous budget spent. Yes, if the overall budget is like around 800 million, then yes, a 17 million cut is going to be minimal in comparison. But it doesn't matter because they need 100 extra million on top of that. And if it's going in the opposite direction of their need, that means that they're underfunded. That's the point. But having said that, obviously more firefighters that are better equipped, more training, more preventative measures, especially with like communicating with the public in dangerous areas that are at risk for wildfires. You need to have a constant upkeep to ensure that there is like dry brush that's cleared out and things of that nature, right? Like all of that stuff, even if you did everything right, even if they got $100 million extra, there is no 100% certainty that they would have stopped all of the fires. You understand what I'm saying? There is always going to be a limit. How many resources you could throw at a problem when the problem becomes too large? Blame the gardeners, eh? That's not what I'm saying. Use James Wood tears to negate fire. Like her point here is that regardless of the underfunding, it's 100-mile winds. 100-mile wind will carry embers to unpredictable places. That's precisely the reason why the Palisades fire basically erupted out of nowhere and carried it all the way to the coastline in a matter of like 2 hours. That's insane. It was basically a fire hurricane. You understand?
As significant as this particular fire, I would say we threw exactly what we could with what we had. So if I had 1,000 engines to throw at this fire, I honestly don't think 1,000 engines at that very moment could have tapped this fire down.
Yeah.
Chief Crowley, thank you so much for your time.
I don't know why they cut her answers, but yeah, she's basically saying that. That's her final conclusion, is that like it's a fire tornado. So even if we had 1,000 additional engines, like we don't know if we could be able to stop this. Even if they have unlimited water, they don't know if they could be able to, they don't know if they could stop it. Like one of the things that a lot of people are talking about are the fire hydrants, okay? And due to pressures and due to electronic pump mechanisms being out of commission because they cut electricity to certain areas in order to mitigate, in order to take extra precautions to ensure that more power lines don't go down and expand the area of fire. There was issues with the electric pumps that actually are supposed to push water into other fire hydrants. The problem, however, is that fire hydrants are there for structural fires. So if you have a large area, or if you have like sporadic structural fires occurring in certain areas, certain neighborhoods, that's what the fire hydrants are for. Fire hydrants are not there to stop a wildfire that has engulfed the entire city, that is in an area that is erupting in fire in a fire tornado. You can't fire hydrant your way out of that problem either. So that's precisely the reason why a lot of the professionals kept saying you can't combat this kind of fire with fire hydrants. That's why they were dumping salt water on the problem, even though salting the earth is obviously devastating in terms of using that land in the future, making the land potentially even more hostile to the elements, making, creating even more dry brush potentially down the line that will make it even worse because you're basically killing the land. That's a last ditch effort at that point. It's also bad for the planes unless they're built for it. No, those are planes that are built for it. Why are you trying to justify the current mayor? Wait, what? Big question for me is why the Democrats don't care about LA. Why Ember started at first place given 50 degrees? Great question. Why did the Ember start? I'm not justifying the current mayor at all. I've already criticized the mayor and continue to do so. I think it's difficult for you to understand that I'm just explaining to you how complex the situation is, and a black and white solution to this kind of issue is always going to be endlessly reductive and also will cause you to hyper focus on random things or greatly overemphasize certain aspects of the problem while refusing to recognize other contributing factors.
And we're thinking of you and all the firefighters.
I want to make sure the community knows our firefighters are absolutely doing everything that we can, and I am certainly proud of how hard and dedicated they are working to save lives and property.
Well said. Thank you, Chief.
Using salt water, using planes at night is a clear indication of the gravity of the situation. It's incredibly dangerous to fly over a fire at night, especially when the wind conditions are so crazy. In many countries in the EU, no matter how bad the fire is, the planes are grounded at sunset. Yeah, it is an act of desperation when you're dumping salt water onto... When you're dumping salt water onto the fire, understand that the situation has gotten completely out of control. That's my point. Yeah, the misconception here is that fire department funding would have stopped this. This is land management fuel issue. Even another 100 million probably wouldn't change anything. No, fire department funding also plays a role in land management, though. For example, I'll tell you this much, and I briefly covered this earlier, but it bears repeating. The fire department, for example, could communicate with neighborhoods like the Pacific Palisades on what the best practices are in terms of like harm mitigation, in terms of like the likelihood that this is a potential area of impact. They can go in ahead of time and make sure that, certain types of trees, for example, are not so close to the houses or clearing, making sure that there's like rigorous fire prevention, fuel prevention, in terms of like clearing out the dry brush out of your houses, things of that nature. Funding would help in that regard as well. This is a very complex situation where more funding does absolutely help, not just in prevention, but also in mitigation. But at the end of the day, if there are 100-mile winds that are carrying embers all over the place, then yeah, you're going to run into a problem regardless. You're going to run into these issues regardless. But funding always helps. That's the point. A resident who lives right by Eden Canyon captured the moment the Eden fire sparked right into the transmission tower on the east side of the canyon. We don't know yet. We do not know if this is the responsible party. I don't think that there's any reason to just like speculate at this point. They will obviously conduct rigorous rigorous investigations to figure out exactly what the source of the fire was initially. My point is, when you have above ground wires with really old infrastructure, historically in the state of California, the highest likelihood is probably 100-mile winds pushing the above ground lines directly into the brush that is already directly into the vegetation that is overgrown, and most likely that is the most likely contributor to this to the spark initially. That's usually what it is. Yeah, here, this is a great example of this. Obviously, California's deadliest wildfire in history started when an uninspected 100-year-old metal hook holding up a high voltage line wore out, dropped the cable, which sparked against the steel tower holding it up. 85 people died. I'm not saying that this was yet another instance of this exact same thing happening, but make no mistake, this is usually a major contributor. I'm not saying that this is the responsible factor here. We don't know yet, but understand that in the past, that was the contributing factor. That was the inception point. So, it's something to consider. The other side of the story is arson. Okay, a lot of people immediately speculated that arson was responsible. Let's take a look. There was a man detained near Kenneth Fire. Initially, everybody reported it as though he was responsible for the arson. A lot of Republicans did victory laps around this, saying, "Oh, this is not climate change," or "This guy that was arrested here, where is it?" Where Shiraz also posted something like that. Good news, they just arrested climate change. Apparently climate change is a Guatemalan dude in this country illegally. So let's take a look at what the authorities have actually said about it.
All right. Good morning. On behalf of the Los Angeles Police Department, I just want to extend our deepest sympathies to all those affected by our fires. And that includes many of our own LAPD officers who've lost homes and property in this fire. And they continue to serve these communities, and I appreciate all their work. I have a number of important updates for all of you today, and I'm going to start by an arrest that was made late yesterday afternoon. So yesterday afternoon, the Kenneth Fire started at the border of West Hills in the city of Los Angeles and Ventura County. At 4:32 p.m., we received a 911 call that a suspect was attempting to light a fire in the community of Woodland Hills and was being detained by residents. Officers from LAPD's Topanga area responded and took that suspect into custody. And once we learned that this suspect was a possible arson suspect, our Major Crimes Division responded to Topanga Division along with Ventura County sheriffs, who is a lead in the Kenneth Fire investigation. But they responded, they interviewed this suspect. After the interview and additional investigative steps, looking at some additional evidence that was present, they made the determination that there was not enough probable cause to arrest this person on arson or suspicion of arson, and therefore this person was arrested on a felony probation violation.